All right, very good. We should get started.
Working on 3 other boats.
1, 2, 3, there's 6 of us here, so we have a quorum. And I want to remind folks here and who are watching that this meeting is being recorded. So these microphones are live, so caution to side conversations. And I've got a nice little sign here, so if the audio doesn't work, hopefully the visual will work to let you know that we're being recorded. And we have 2 minutes, I believe, to approve. Is that correct? We have, or is it just the?
We have both.
Yeah, April and March, and both have been distributed to us via email. So if I could have a motion, we'll do the March one first, a motion to accept the March minutes that were distributed.
So moved.
All right, and a second.
Second?
All right, any additions, corrections that anybody saw on that? Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Abstain.
abstention. And Susan, you can abstain. 'Cause you
Abstain.
You weren't official then. And then we have the April set of minutes that were distributed to the committee. Have a motion to accept the April minutes.
So moved.
All right, and a second.
Second.
All right, that's Jim. And any discussion on one of these? I think it was the April one. Could be wrong. I think there was a little, I saw just a typo, I think. Yeah, I think it's on page 4, just a typo in that second paragraph on page 4. It just says Chairman Bakesmith, which actually sounds pretty cool. So you can, if you want to leave it, that's fine. I thought that has a certain ring to it, but you could correct that. Great. So all in favor of accepting the minutes with that one correction?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
all right.
Abstain?
And abstain?
I
And
wasn't
one
there, so I'll
abstention.
abstain too.
All right, 2 abstentions. All right, very good. And then an update on our executive session minutes. I checked with Attorney Savastano. He said they were not, the matter was not yet to be considered closed. I think we were waiting for a decision from the Attorney General's office. I think they review both the complaint and the response, and then I guess they give a bureaucratic thumbs up or something. You hear something, I guess, from the Attorney General's office. So as long as the matter is considered still open, then the minutes will not be posted. But once the matter is considered closed, then the executive minutes will be posted on our website. All right, very good. Membership update. I'd like to welcome Susan Murray here, our new at-large member. The select board approved her a couple weeks ago, I think. Yeah, which is fantastic. And Susan, I don't know if you want to just take the next 20 minutes and describe yourself to the committee, or you could do it in 2 minutes or less.
Yeah. So my name is Susan Murray. I grew up in Dartmouth, and I now have a farm in Dartmouth, Flying Carrot Farm on Elm Street. My husband and I have been running that for 13 years now. I'm also the executive director of the Southeastern Mass Agricultural Partnership, CMAP, which is the buy local organization for Southeastern Massachusetts. So we help promote local food access, and are a problem-solving organization for farmers in Southeastern Mass. So that's Bristol, Plymouth, and Norfolk counties.
Great, well, welcome, and this is great. We had talked about, someone with agricultural kind of experience and kind of an investment that would be a great addition to the committee, so welcome. And Susan and I had a chance to have a short meeting while she was waiting at soccer practice, I believe, to go over some of just the overview of the CPC and Community Preservation Act, so that was great. Very good. So invoices and correspondence. And what we do is we'll look at these. Everybody has a chance to look at them. They kind of get to the end. And then John will make a motion to approve payment. This first invoice is in the amount of $969.75 for the dog park, which is out at the Dartmouth Regional Park, and is for professional services, construction cost estimate, on-site meeting with the client, project administration and coordination. I had written to Tim to let him know and gave him a copy of the project status form and said that we need that on all invoices going forward, starting in April. So I haven't received that yet. Michelle has heard that maybe his understanding was perhaps that Chris Vitale was going to send it to me. So what I would suggest here, if you take a look at it, but what I would suggest is a motion to approve subject to receipt of the project status report. And then we could swing by, when we have it, we can swing by and sign the invoice. But take a look at this. And do we have any other invoices? That's the only one?
That's the only one.
All right, that's the only one. So just take your time. And any questions, we can take that up.
Motion to approve the invoice for GAF Engineering for the dog park, in the amount of $969.75. Conditionally, will not be, check will not be written until we receive the quarterly report.
All right, second?
Second.
All right, any questions on the invoice? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous, and then we sign it on the way back.
I abstained from.
No, you can now kind of,
Aye.
aye, all right, unanimous. And then next on our agenda is the eligibility consultation request for the Dartmouth Cultural Center, and folks are here to talk to that. This is great, so let us sign this, and then I would ask if you're ready.
We're actually waiting for Kathleen.
All right, well, we can play with the agenda a little bit. Happy to do that. All right. Okay, let me just skip over to the update on the town warrant recommendations. And one thing I did forget with invoices and correspondence. I just received an email today, and I don't know if everyone is on the coalition's email list, but they got a more specific figure from the Department of Revenue, that the anticipated state match this year, or for fiscal '25, we'll get it in the fall, is 14.4%. So that, when we heard from the coalition that we should be conservative in our projections, and it would be under 20%, we revised our financial projections to carry a state match of 15%. So we're pretty close to what the DOR is saying. As we get closer to it, as the coalition said, it's quite possible, it might be 1 or 2 or 3 percentage points higher than what's projected. But our financial projections are we don't have to make any amendments to those. We're pretty close to that figure. And the town meeting, so I'll just skip over to the update on town warrant recommendations, and then we'll come back. So I submitted the town meeting packet, so I think we're good there, and have the description of all of the projects, the votes, that were taken at the committee. Our budget is in there. Our administrative budget is in the packet, as well as an update on the funds committed to date. So it looks very much like our previous year's packet. The one thing I did add, just again continuing kind of with the transparency for town meeting and the public, with our budget, which lays out our expected revenue, our debt service, administrative costs, our proposed project spending, et cetera, the reserves, all those sorts of things where money ends up in the course of the year. I also added our projections for our account balances as of June 30th, so the start of the fiscal year. So I think that's probably the one additional piece of information I added to the packet. But we're good to go there. Okay, now you're ready. Excellent, excellent. So we have a request for eligibility kind of consultation from the Cultural Center. And I think the committee members have received it. Very briefly, I'll read kind of the description, then we can hear more about it and have a discussion about it. Phase 4 will consist of restoring the original floors as well as the woodwork throughout the building. The fireplace in the reading room needs to be restored, even though it will not be usable. Also, in the office, there will be a workspace built in keeping with the appearance of the rest of the building. So there's probably a little bit more to say about that, but this was all that was needed to get everybody here. So if there's, who would like to give us a, and if you could come up to the mic and then let us know who you are, that's very helpful for the minutes and DCTV.
Okay, great. Catherine Duff. I'm a partner and founder at Studio to Sustain Architects in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And we've been working with the Dartmouth Cultural Center for, well, first on a feasibility study. Now we're on phase 1 and packaging a set of drawings, getting ready to go out to bid on the handicap accessibility upgrades to the building. So thank you all for the funding, for your support of that project, and also for the funding, which is enabling us to move forward, in addition to the funding raised by the Dartmouth Cultural Center. So phase 4, we anticipate that the floors are going to need to be restored. And the building's in great shape, the woodwork's in great shape, but part of our work in the first phase is with the handicap upgrades, we were able to actually preserve these historic 10-panel doors, which are quite unusual and they're quite beautiful in the main space. And we would like to restore those, really bring back the natural wood. They are natural wood, but they've been covered with a few coats of varnish and whatnot over the years. So we want to restore those and then paint the galleries, and in addition, restore the floors. So the floors are a little complicated because we can see that the original floors were about 1.25 inches tongue and groove wood, which to be expected for a library building. They were covered with what appears to be about 1/4 inch Luan plywood, and then put tile, 1 by 1 tile was put down, like a vinyl composite tile. And then on top of that, carpet. So we need to remove the carpet, we need to remove the tile, we need to remove the Luan, and then get down to the original wood floors, and then restore those, which is a process of stripping them and then patching where we need to, and filling what is undoubtedly a lot of nail holes, and probably putting a light stain on that wood just to even out the inconsistency over the years, and also the patching. And then we'll do a really robust 5 layers of water-based, high-traffic polyurethane on them. That should hold it for the next 200 years. And I did bring some drawings, just if anyone's interested in seeing where we are with sort of the progress on the first phase, the handicap accessibility, which is kind of exciting, actually. So I'm happy
Would
to.
folks be interested in a little bit of
Anyone
Yes.
interested in an update?
Please.
We are interested, yes.
And we meet monthly with the building committee for the Dartmouth Cultural Center. They have a building committee, and it's got fantastic representation. And members of typically the Board of Selectmen come to that meeting, and then Chris Vitale is invited, and
Very good.
Magnolia comes to the meetings as well. So it's so having the input is great, actually. So pipe in, ladies and gentlemen, if I misrepresent or you want to add anything. So just to go over the areas that we were just talking about. So here's the tile floor. It's not such a great picture, but you can sort of see it in our, and I want to show this picture because when you see the drawings, you'll understand what we're doing here. So this, you just came in the historic entrance, you're looking north. Our handicap new door is going to go here and exit onto a ramp that takes you down to a handicap parking spot in the existing parking area off of Elm Street. So this cabinetry that it isn't really used will be removed in that phase as well. And that's that. This is looking at their office area, and we're going to, rework the storage so that it's really much more effective and will enable us to unclutter some of that clutter. And then this is the main reading room that now uses the gallery. You can see that it's got carpet on top of it. We have determined that carpet is over tile, which is over the plywood, the Luan plywood. So all of that would come out. And then the woodwork would get, it's in very good shape, but just cleaned up a little bit and then painted, and the walls will get painted and the ceiling painted. And then this is looking in at the historic door, the main historic entrance. That's also one of those 10-panel doors, which would get restored as well in this phase, the phase 4. I don't have a really great picture. There are 2 more of those 10-panel doors framing this archway looking into the office area. I think that's, I don't have a picture of it, but I've got a good drawing of it. So this is looking into their office area. Part of this fourth phase would be the restoration of these doors, which become after the handicap accessibility become inactive, but we'll keep them. They'll just be locked in place. They won't be active doors. And this piece of millwork, which will continue the patterning of the wood panel throughout the space, is a half wall because we had to redo that stair, make it code compliant down to the basement level. And then behind this door is the handicap accessible toilet, but accessible through this hallway. So it turned out, you know, as all things are, it's a little more complicated when we started to dive into the construction documents. Just to bring everybody up to speed, this is the existing building. This is the basement that they use for their art classes. This is the first floor. This is a ship's ladder stair going down to the basement, and then there's another one that goes up to the attic in that same zone right there. And then the parking area off of Elm Street, the concrete pad, and this is the historic entrance. It's very, very, very difficult, I would say impossible, to make this handicap accessible without great expense because of the change in elevation and then the sidewalk here that has a 14-inch granite curve down to the sidewalk and then onto Prospect Street. We did look at it, several options, and determined it was really not feasible and you still didn't have handicap parking, easy access to it. So this is what's being proposed for the handicap accessibility for the building. This is, again, your existing parking area. We do have to modify it a little bit on the western half of it to get it to slope, reduce the slope a little bit. This is access to the ramp. This is the ramp on the north side of the building. Takes you up to the new handicap accessible entrance door here. And then this nicely fits in with this circulation zone. It's exactly opposite the historic entrance. There's a nice little conversation that happens there between the old and the new. And then we'll remove that cabinetry in front of these windows and restore this as more gallery space actually on either side, flanking that historic window. And then the modifications to the bathroom to make it handicap accessible. And we also have a handicap accessible art sink there next to that bathroom. And then the modification of the stair going downstairs to make it code compliant. This is just a blow up of that area. We're proposing in this next phase, the millwork for phase 4, a movable sort of stationary volunteer docent's desk, if you will, for lack of a better word, for someone to sit the gallery. They have volunteers that do that now, but they do it back here, so if someone comes in, they have to actually leave their desk and come out to the entrance. So we're proposing that. We don't want it fixed, we want it movable so that it can be put in place and act as a podium. Sometimes they do poetry readings, or they'll have a conversation with a local traveling artist, and those talks typically are held in this area. It's complicated because you have the sewer line coming out here, right? So here's your sewer line, and thanks to the town of Dartmouth, DPI for giving us all the drawings about that. But this is the location of your sewer line. So we're trying to be a little tricky and careful, obviously, on the framing of the ramp. And then you have a gutter that's discharging right now just onto grade, and most of it ends up flowing out into Elm Street, and the same with these two downspouts here that flow out onto Elm Street. So we're looking at being, you know, a little more responsible with that and creating a wash stone dry well there to receive that water from that downspout, and then potentially one here in the front of the building as well. This is the section through the stair that we're proposing. You can see this is the ship's ladder going up to the attic space that exists up here. You can see that's up to utility space. There's not habitable space in the attic. And then this is our stair coming down to the basement, and that would meet the commercial code, have railings on both sides, be much safer. This is a picture of that ship's ladder going up to it's a little deceiving because it comes up to a little landing, and then you have a door, and you unlatch the door, and then you go up another set of stairs up and climb up into the attic space. Really, the only reason you go up there is, obviously, if there was a fire in the building, the fire department has to get up there, check, make sure there's no fire up there. But for maintenance, and also to do some thermal upgrades to the building. And I don't think we'll put any equipment up there, but if you did, you might put an air air distribution up there. Okay, the basement, I think that's it.
Questions? Just, so remind me of, so phase one is the handicapped accessibility.
Correct.
So and remind me of what phase two and three are.
Phase two is the, I don't have the notes in front of me, so
Yeah.
don't hold
Just-
my feet to the fire. So, so my head's been buried in the handicap accessibility issues. Thermal upgrade and the envelope enclosure.
Oh, you should go back to the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, then I can just hide behind the panel.
You're-
Over here.
So we're doing the thermal upgrades to the exterior, the enclosure, and the HVAC. So when we do that, those thermal upgrades, storm panel system on the historic windows, the repair of the historic windows, which includes, you've got some rot on those windows. And at that time, we'll do the upgrade to the HVAC system, switch it over to the all-electric. I don't want to size that system until we actually look at the thermal upgrades. It doesn't make sense to size it until you do your air sealing and if we add vapor control measures up in the attic space and on the exterior wall, we want to do that first so that we size that heat pump correctly. And then the last phase will be the repointing of the exterior and the restoration of the gutters. We'll do a replica fiberglass replica gutter that looks like a wood gutter.
And so are phases one, two, and three funded, or so?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And we hope to, Dartmouth Cultural Center is an all-volunteer
Yeah.
organization, right? Because the building's owned by the town, but leased by a nonprofit, we have to follow the IFB, the Invitation for Bid for Public Buildings. So it's, if you've never, there's no one in the organization that's ever gone through an IFB. It's a complicated process. It requires advertising, there's a protocol system, et cetera, public opening, all of that. So we haven't done it yet. We're gonna do it with the handicap. But my hope, and I've been so impressed with every one of them, they're fast learners. Don't be deceived by the fact that they haven't been through a public bid yet. They're very quick learners. And we have 2 members on the building committee who are very familiar with public contracts that will help us to vet that process. And the reason we asked them to be on the building committee was because of their experience doing public building. And so, but my hope is we get through this first one, the next 2 will go much faster. But it's a learning curve, right? You have to walk through the learning curve with the first one. So we're gonna do the handicap accessibility, but right behind it, we're gonna do the thermal improvements and the HVAC system, and work around their gallery schedule. Our anticipation is we're gonna be under construction with this. We'll start in the fall, but they'll do all the interior work January and February when they're closed. So get the ramp in, get the parking area all tidied up, get the exterior work done, and then come inside and do the toilet and the stair.
And there wasn't an amount in this, on this form, that was left blank. Do you have a sense of how much might be requested? Oh, it is there?
Oh, you got it.
Oh, interesting.
I
Yes, that's interesting. I have, I must have, were there 2 forms? Was there like an updated form?
Oh, we didn't get this.
I think we did send that in.
Okay. Okay, great. So 110,000 is
Yes.
right now kind of an estimate. All right, great, thank you. Yeah, I did.
Buddy, that's phase 4?
Yes.
Phase 4,
Okay.
yeah.
The form I got doesn't have a figure on it.
Yeah, so I think there was probably an updated form
Yeah.
that I did not get out to folks. Okay,
Apologies about that. I think it's somewhere around 87 to 90,000. We put in a 15% contingency, and then we did a 10% for professional services. Again, you got to go through the IFB process for all of the work.
And so would please jump in if you have any questions. Would the cultural center look to submit an application for this for the October town meeting? So, our funding round's gonna be October town meeting or in October 2024, or the next one is gonna be June 2025. Would you put in for it for the October town meeting and have it lined up? So you don't have a break in construction and things like that?
Would that probably be a very good idea? October?
And that means, and so typically, we would then, if town meeting approved, then we would sign another agreement for that portion. And typically, our agreements are minimally, a year term and renew. So if you applied in June, the October town meeting, if the meeting approved it, then the funds would be made available probably, as of December 1st and remain available, through December 2025 and could be, extended, as needed. That's kind of typically how our stuff works. I'm just wondering, timing-wise, if you see these, as these phases unroll, does that make sense to keep the work moving on a project like this? Otherwise, funding would be available, you would apply in January, June town meeting, so probably the earliest funding would be available would be July 2025. I don't know what other folks think, but
I appreciate that. I think we probably, wouldn't use the funds until next year, 2025, just we're gonna be so busy getting all of this work done.
yeah,
And it's never a perfect world. Undoubtedly, we go to put the bathroom in, we're gonna, tidy that stuff up, and it's gonna be hard pressed to get all that done in 2 months before they open up for their March 1st gallery opening. So I think the whole focus is gonna be the handicap accessibility, and then we'll be well underway with our second phase, which will be the system upgrade and the thermal improvements. And would be next in line. So I think it would be safe either, but I don't, but I really appreciate keeping everything going because we've got traction. We know the building now. We've spent a lot of time there. We've had some really good professionals come through. We've got great support. The building's in fantastic shape. And I don't think there's too many unknowns, but you never say never until you open up a wall. But I think we feel like we're prepared for handling it now. And so I'm happy to do either, whatever the recommendation is.
yeah, and I think that's up to, the cultural center, obviously the one downside is, that, it's just having enough information or feeling confident enough about that's how much you need for that phase, but,
Really good point.
that's the only downside.
What I would probably do before, I'd probably pull up a piece of the flooring and get a professional
Yeah.
contractor in,
Yeah.
a flooring contractor.
I was
give me a
actually
price.
gonna ask you that, if you knew the age of the tile approximately, and if there's any asbestos issues you may run into.
Say the 50s.
Yeah, asbestos would definitely change the
That could eat up a
situation.
lot of your funding if
Yeah, I really
it does
appreciate that,
contain
too.
it.
It's not a 9x9, it's a 12x12. It looks like a peel and stick, but I would definitely get it tested.
Yeah,
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 no
that's
question about
probably
it.
a very good idea, because that will definitely change the budget.
I would say 1950s tile,
Yeah,
maybe 60, but I doubt it.
yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah, so we would definitely, that's a really great suggestion. I'd get it tested, make sure that
Yeah.
the adhesive doesn't, because sometimes that's the
Yeah,
tricky thing.
sometimes
It
it's
has
adhesive, not the
asbestos in it.
tile, yeah. Yeah.
Where the tile might be clean, but the adhesive has some asbestos in it.
Yeah.
And then I would get a get a flooring contractor in to have a look at the existing floor, what it would take to bring that back.
Yeah,
I made some pretty good assessments just on our experience of working
Yeah.
with older buildings, but it's always great to have somebody come through and look at it. And I think there's that area in the back where they're using it for storage. We could pull up a piece of that floor and have that tested.
okay, yeah, John?
I had the same comment as Kyle. I think it's important that you investigate whether you got asbestos there or not. That can certainly change the funding and the dynamics of the project. I'm assuming the flooring you're trying to restore is oak?
Don't know. I just see it's wood. I definitely know it's wood. I actually don't know the species. It's thick. That's,
So how comfortable are you that the floors, because we've heard they're covered with plywood, linoleum, and how comfortable that are you that you've got original floors underneath all of that information? Have you?
throughout the whole
Right,
space?
and what's Plan B if you find out that the original floors aren't there? They were only scattered throughout the building.
So I don't see any discrepancy in the floor height, and the existing wood flooring is thick. It's like 1.25 inches. You can see where they drilled holes through it where the bathroom is right now. So in a situation like that, where if they've patched in with a couple layers of plywood or whatever, who knows, something over the years, they had a bad leak in the building or something, we would pull up the plywood and put wood in it to match the species. It's not gonna match the color, absolutely won't.
Oh, understood, but
Yeah.
one of the things I'd wanna see if you're gonna apply for this, is that you do a little bit more investigation with your contractors, determine what is the wood. Is it 1.5 inches throughout? That tongue and groove, some of the reasons why flooring got covered over is it got sanded so much, you came down to the tongue, and your flooring wasn't effective anymore because they've taken so much off it. I don't know if that's a case where you folks are at, but, certainly an expert coming in and doing some testing, poking some holes here and there would probably be able to determine what
Yeah.
you got there and whether it's worth restoring. And
Yeah,
then-
fair enough. Fair enough. It's, I'm encouraged because I don't see it dipping a lot, so but it wouldn't surprise me, just having worked on so many old buildings. It's not unusual at all to see areas that have been patched in over the years because of pre-damage from something.
Right. And then there was mention of the fireplace, and I didn't think I heard it in your presentation. What are you doing to the fireplace?
Oh, just cleaning it up. It's actually in pretty good shape. It's a beautiful terracotta tile, and we're gonna clean it. I think a part of it has a little bit of varnish on it. We'd like to restore that. Just get the finish. Sometimes those things were sealed, which was never a good idea to do to stone, natural stone. So we're gonna just take that off and get it back to its natural finish. We're not using the fireplace.
Yeah, that was in what you submitted, that
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
usable anyways.
Just clean up the tile and clean off the varnish that was put on it. Yeah. It is a nice feature in the gallery space, actually. But yeah, I agree. I think we can pull up some corners. I think we can easily pull up some corners in the rooms and have a look at the tile, at the floor. There's, we just had a big ribbon cutting on a project we were involved in. My office last Friday was an old warehouse, an 1850s warehouse that was turned into 10 units of housing. And we ended up keeping all the floors throughout the 3 stories of the warehouse. And it was a whole mix of oak, fir, over the years, southern yellow pine. But nowadays, there are interesting products that are epoxy, for lack of a better word, like an epoxy spackle. So when you have a really pitted floor or a floor that's just totally worn and sometimes that tongue gets exposed, you're able to do an epoxy spackle over that whole area. and then it gets sanded down and stained, and honestly, you'd be hard pressed to find where you filled it in. So sometimes I don't always like to use that product in high traffic areas, but I have used it, and we used it on that, in that warehouse in a couple areas where it was just, just use from a couple hundred years of a heavy use of a building. But anyways.
Great, thank you. Jim?
I'm surprised that the town doesn't have a centralized resource that is the town's expertise in the bidding process on projects like this. I mean, does every department that has a building process that, every little department that has a building process have to learn as they go?
On town-owned buildings. You don't have to do.
Yeah, no,
Town-owned buildings,
I'm new to town, but I came from a place where there was a standing building committee for the town.
Oh.
And it had an architect, an engineer, a lawyer, and they managed construction projects for, every construction project bigger than a doghouse in town. And nobody's thought of that, huh?
No, I did not think so.
Town's not that rich.
Boy, I don't think it was, I think they saved money.
Yeah, I would agree, if when managed correctly, we've had some mismanagement of buildings, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's in the city of New Bedford, it's done through the Office of Procurement, and the auditor, town auditor gets involved in all public bids because the city's protecting their assets in the event they get audited. So you typically do get a lot of help. It's the IFB is managed by the city. They give you the form to fill out, and it's about 30 pages long, and you fill out the sections per project that are specific to your project, but they hold your hand through the whole process, and they actually will, in instances, they'll put it up on the Combis website for you. They'll make sure you hit all the deadlines.
yeah.
But it's a bigger budget, and they get audited, and they have to really be careful about that stuff. So one of the reasons I asked a colleague of mine from Boston who recently moved down here, who managed the public bid process for the city of Boston, to be on the building committee, and he graciously accepted, and he's just a wealth of information in terms of helping with that process.
Don't let him get away.
Yeah.
I know, Michael, he's so wonderful. So I think he's gonna be hugely helpful for the Dartmouth Cultural Center to help walk them through the process of this. And we can help too. I mean, we do public bid projects in our office, but Michael really has experience doing public building work.
Very good. Any other questions? Great, so I think our feedback, obviously, is that it's eligible for CPA funds, and I think we are excited about this project and what's underway, so I think it's a matter of, confirming how much that phase 4 will cost, based on a little bit more information, probably is advisable. And then, for the cultural center to decide the timing of the application. But I just, my kind of feedback is that, as it goes, it's possible, a scenario of applying in June could make sense for you all. It certainly is something that wouldn't be premature for making a recommendation to the town, since you would be, you're already underway, and we're talking about money that wouldn't be available to December 1st anyway.
Can I ask a
things to
question
think
to
about.
the
Yeah.
committee? Does the town work with someone specifically, a company specifically for doing abatement work or testing for asbestos or anything like that? Do you work with with the company?
You know, not that I'm aware of.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Probably could ask the building department.
I know the library just had an asbestos issue, and that was, I think Tim Lancaster spearheaded that, but
I just thought I'd ask. Sometimes
Yeah.
towns
I don't
work
know
with.
if they have a contractor they rely on.
Uh-huh. Yeah, unaware, okay.
All right, great.
Thank you very much,
Oh, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
It's our pleasure, really.
And
Thank you.
appreciate the update, too. Okay, on the town, just one other thing on the town meeting, or the town warrant recommendations. So I've submitted the town, our document for the town meeting packet. And Jim, most graciously, last person standing, to be at town meeting, to present these articles, which I appreciate, since I will be fishing in Michigan.
Do you know about Zoom? Oh,
But
God. Yeah,
you and I should get together.
yes.
So,
We have that big one.
let's talk at the end of this, after the meeting, let's
Okay,
find a date to do that, and
Fine.
I'll have everything laid out. So, yeah, and I will be more careful about those fishing trip schedules. It's like totally escaped me until I was like, I'm gonna be in the middle of nowhere on June 4th.
no internet.
All right, so we'll talk, but you and I will go over this, and any of you all who are town meeting members, you know, back Jim up if anybody's giving him a hard time, which I don't think will happen.
Fearless leader has gone fishing.
Yeah, I gone fishing, yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna let Melissa know that I'm gone fishing, so she's aware, and, you know, and she's very good about keeping the process on, you know, on keel, and CPA articles tend to be the first ones to be dealt with, so, but I will let her know that you're gonna handle this, and I'm not gonna be there. All right, so next on our agenda is project updates. I have forwarded to you all a number of project updates. And in the first month of the quarter, we ask all the sponsors to just fill out one of these forms, be brief. So I'm happy to say that everybody was brief and to the point. Subsequently, if there are any invoices submitted, this form would be completed for the invoice. But some of these projects, there aren't invoices, and so in the beginning of the quarter, we kind of at least get one statement from folks about where things stand. Housing rehab loan program, currently on hold, while the town council updates the loan documents. So they've made some changes to the program to encourage more residents to take advantage of it. And the legal documentation for the program had not been looked at since it was originally approved many years ago, probably at least 10, maybe more than 10 years ago. So council is taking a look at that. And later this spring, they expect to be back on track with the program. Housing trust program currently paused. There is $494,221.86 available in the trust. And with the rising mortgage rates and sales prices, They need to go back and take a look at terms and conditions for this program and buying down how much the program will provide in terms of down payment assistance. Because under its current, I think it's capped at 150,000, I think. So under its current kind of amount, you can't get to an affordable price at the mortgage rates. So they really have to kind of, they're taking a look at the program and what's feasible. Looking to bring a consultant on to help them try to figure out what they can do. We've had our update from the cultural center, and actually more detailed because the architect provided it. Partners in Housing had previously given us a request with their April invoice. The project is out to bid, and they expect to be opening sub-bids and the general contracting bid as of the 1st of May. And they will look and see what they bought, and then from the bids, and work with the state about the final funding for the housing project. The Heritage Trail, the kiosks are built and installed, and they are just dealing with what they describe briefly as long lead times and multiple town approvals needed. And this is probably related to getting the signage up. So the town, the select board did approve the logo, and now it's a matter of installing signage along the roadway for this, I think ends up being like a 35-mile bike loop or bike route around the town that connects all of these kiosks. And the Pascomansit River Drinking Water Project, there will be an article presented at the June town meeting. The article is not ready for the fall town meeting. So the acquisition of the property will be scheduled, the closing will be scheduled shortly after town meeting approves the article in June. So assuming town meeting approves the article, then there'll be a closing scheduled for most likely in June, by the end of June, maybe early July. I sat in on a meeting with the state and the town, and just talking through the conservation restriction for this property. And the town council had some questions about it, but they seem to have worked through the terms and conditions that would make sense for this property. And in doing so, we're talking about shooting for a late June, early July closing. So that seems to be moving forward. And then the final thing is something we need to take action on. It is a narrative, and it's a closeout report. And the closeout report on the Russell Mills land conservation, that's phase 2. They finally worked through the conservation restriction issues with the state. And what you had received in email is basically the requirements of a closeout report that are in the program agreement. So they submitted the financial information, reviewing the amounts of invoice amounts, and they provided a narrative describing having acquired this land, and now they have trails on it, public access to the site, and So we have a motion to accept the closeout report and release the remaining balance of $20,250. And so, any questions on the closeout for this project?
Is this the Fentress property?
Yes, yep. So if I give a motion to approve the release of $20,250 to DNRT as closing out the Russell Mills Conservation.
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's approved. And so, I have on our agenda next, a review of the application and submission guidelines. And so, I don't know if anyone has had, I just want to give us a chance, we haven't looked at it for a while, if there are any comments or about the submission guidelines or application that maybe we should think of in terms of revising or amending? Or are folks okay with what we currently have in place?
I don't see a reason to change anything.
Okay.
It's been working, so
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Kyle, are you okay with that?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
with them.
All right,
That
just wanted to
works.
put that on the table, because I think every once in a while we should take a, have a chance to talk about that. Okay. I think, Michelle, related to this is I think we don't always get the 10 hard copies. And I'm thinking that, we probably shouldn't, when we're lax about that, then what happens is it ends up on your workload, because most of the committee members would like to see a hard copy because they write on it and it's easy to read, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just we should be more, we should really hold out for that. And I'm fine, I think the committee probably, we try to be flexible, so I don't think we would necessarily toss an application because there are only 3 copies provided. But I think we could basically say, you need to give us 10 copies or we can't review the application. Because otherwise, I'm just thinking, I've been lax about that, or I haven't checked in about that, but really,
I don't think we've ever received one since
yeah,
we've
the
been.
workload ends up on you, and I don't think that's not fair. So let's try to remember to hold out for that. The next thing I have on the agenda is, and boy, man, both Gretchen and I are having printer issues. All of the electronics in our household are all dying at the same time. It's really like, really? Let's see, so I think I think I might have gotten 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now there's 5, so that's pretty close. Oh, can you do that? Oh, okay, great, thank you. We'll start and get those passed, 1 for each. But yeah, I don't know what it is with electronics, my computer, her laptop, my printer, and then she tried printing in from her printer, and it was making like, it was,
Are they from the 1980s?
well, I do
One of those daisy wheel ones that the,
It would
probably still work
if it was from the 1980s.
the version of Word I have is 2007. And so Microsoft has informed me personally that they do not support that trash anymore. So I do have a new computer, but it's in a box, and now I have to figure out like how to transfer everything over. It's just like, anyway. Today was the printers were all like going down.
Just never know.
Well, in the meantime, while Michelle is making a couple of copies, as follow-up from our last meeting, I am looking at some examples of where other towns have used the CPA for like land trusts. And so I've seen examples in the database for Belmont, Boston, Boxborough, Groton, Maynard, Northampton, Norwell, Norwood. So I'm gonna, next thing is kind of start to try to look a little more deeply into some of these, just to see like,
Thank you.
how they have done it, so I'm gonna see if I can find, see online their warrant articles and stuff like that. Maybe talk to a couple of people, get some ideas of how other towns have used the CPA fund for land trusts. And I've also looked at the database and come up with several projects in which the CPA funds were used for land conservation restrictions on land acquired by private entities, like other kind of like a DNRT type of organization. So I can kind of, and again, I'm going to look a little more deeply in these and just see, okay, how did they structure their warrant article, and maybe talk to a couple of people about how that process works with their conservation commission. So I've got a few ideas of where to do some research and get some examples of both that will help us with the agricultural trust idea and also with the how to put together a process around the conservation restriction. So what I've passed out, thank you for making the copies, is, and I wanted to just talk about this for a little bit with you all, see if am I headed in the right direction. So as we know, the state does not, will no longer approve conservation restrictions that are not held by the town, or if it's privately acquired property, or acquired by the town, that there's the conservation restriction is awarded to another entity to hold it. So the idea that some of our acquisition projects in the past that the state has approved, in which the holder of the conservation restriction may have been a different entity, say like Buzzards Bay, or the way it functioned, it looked like we were giving the funds for the conservation restriction to the private entity. And that, which was then used towards the acquisition of the property. And so, so here's kind of the parameters as I've been able to understand them. So the town of Dartmouth is the applicant for all open space acquisitions, including, and this will include recreation projects, so land acquired for recreation. The CR, conservation restriction, have confirmed can be held jointly by the town and another entity, so it can be jointly held. So I think that leaves us with these options. One is the town acquires the property and the conservation and restriction is held by a separate entity. The Pascamanzet River project is a good example of that. Town's gonna acquire it, and I think it's Buzzards Bay Coalition is holding the restriction. Because a town can't hold a restriction on itself.
Right.
Another option is a private entity acquires the property, and then the town purchases the conservation restriction and retains the responsibility for administering the conservation restriction. So, I buy the land, and then then the town buys an interest in the land, which is the value of the conservation restriction. So, and the town's the applicant.
We've never done that before, right? That example.
That's not how we have done it in the past. That's right. And I think this is where the state says their reading of it, this administration, is that's how it has to be done. And so like you close on the property and then you purchase the restriction from the person who acquired the property. You purchase an interest in that property.
Why are we in the middle on it then if they're not requiring CPA funds?
Well, this is where this is where the CPA funds are used. So the CPA funds, so someone says we need, $200,000 to purchase a conservation restriction. So it's like, let's say, property's $600,000. With a conservation restriction, it's worth $400,000. So someone like DNRT would pay the $600,000 because the private the private owner seller is like, I'll sell it for $600,000. And so then an organization like DNRT say, okay, well, we'll buy it from you for $600,000, and then the town is going to purchase an interest in this and purchase the conservation restriction for $200,000. So ultimately, out of pocket, in that example, DNRT would be out $400,000, and they would have assistance of $200,000 from the CPA funds that helped them make that purchase. So I believe that's kind of the timing of how things would happen. Right now, those funds, as I understand it, in the previous transactions, buy the conservation restriction, the interest for $200,000, but that goes to DNRT, and DNRT purchase the property. So they get the 200, and then they take the other 400 that they've raised through other grants or privately, and they buy the property. And this is buy the property, then the town buys the conservation, the interest in it.
So it is the order of these transactions that matters.
That's my understanding.
It seemed like the state had a problem with, say, DNRT accepting the CPA funds.
Yeah.
And then just going to the purchase and sale with the $600,000 and the town not having any ownership in the piece of property. Now, you just gave the taxpayer money away to purchase the property, but the town didn't retain any kind of ownership over it.
Yeah, because
I think that's the way I understood it.
I think that's right, because the warrant article, would, in the past, would read $200,000 to DNRT for, acquisition of this property. So the state's saying, no, we can't give CPA funds. Where's the town's real property interest? Where it's the town that is committing the money. So it has to be the town that receives the money. So I think that was the state's reading. We can't see where, it looks like you gave the money to DNRT. But the town is supposed to have an interest in the property, but we can't see in the warrant article where the town has an interest in the property. So,
I think in that example, Buddy.
Yeah.
The only thing that we have to be careful with, and I've never really, other than reading a conservation restriction, I've never really dove into it to really, know the nuts and bolts of it, but we just have to make sure that that restriction, where it says retains responsibility for
Yeah.
administrating it, that make sure that that doesn't cost the town any money.
right,
For like future whatever down the road, does, Mark Garrett have to do X, Y, Z
yeah,
every year or whatever. We
Right.
just wanna make
Right.
sure that that's put on Buzzards Bay or DNRT or something like that.
yep, exactly. So the other parameter is, and I think this is one we've always understood and worked with, is the CPA funds can't exceed the assessed value of the property, or they cannot, when we're purchasing a conservation restriction, they can't exceed the value of the conservation restriction. That we've always followed, so that's why we get appraisals in these projects, and we're always careful about that. It's really the logistics, the technical piece about who is actually, is the fund, who are the funds going to? Whose hands do they pass through? And they have to pass through the town's hands, basically, is probably a simplification of it. We can ask, you can use CPA funds for an endowment. I think we've had that discussion around the historic preservation years ago. But CPA funds can be used for an endowment to address the kinds of costs that Kyle kind of alluded to. And then, as I've said, the CR purchase is executed after the land is acquired. Because like, if I'm the seller, I'm not putting the restriction on my land.
Right.
It's the buyer who is agreeing to put the restriction, so the buyer has to own it in order for the restriction to be sold to them and put on the property. So that's why that kind of has to happen in that order. So I think those are kind of basic parameters. So then I started thinking through, okay, so what would we need to kind of be sure of to operate this way? And other towns have been doing it this way. So we're not inventing something, we're just trying to figure out how we're doing this. I think one is using a template conservation restriction. I think there is one out there. Mark, I think Garrett has identified one that the state has recommended. So there is such a thing as a template. What I think we would want to consider is the template, but also they're working in standard language, and I don't know the template, but our template would be best if it included the agricultural use allowance and the maintenance of the agricultural landscape. And those are things that we negotiated in previous projects with DNRT, like Dyke Creek. And instead of like negotiating those every time, couldn't they just be made standard? Because that would typically be our approach unless there was a reason not to do it. But start with making it standard language. So that might be something we'd want to work out. Because of so my third bullet here is as Kyle points out, there's a workload issue that comes with holding a conservation restriction. Your due diligence is to go out there at least annually, walk the property, and confirm that the terms and conditions of the restriction have not been violated. If we continue to add more of these projects, or have more of these projects, then that would increase the conservation agent's workload in town. So I'm thinking one way to address that, since you can jointly hold a restriction, is perhaps the Conservation Commission can come to some agreement with a couple of other entities who they could partner with for these kinds of restrictions, whether it be Buzzards Bay, DNRT could hold them if, if they weren't the owner, that maybe the Conservation Commission could work out some agreements and know that there's this other entity who actually could do the work.
Yeah, and maybe that could go in the standard language.
Yeah.
That, it's being held jointly with whatever organization, would be required to submit that report every year.
Yeah.
That, say, Mark would go out and do if the town was holding it by itself.
Yeah, so it's possible that, if the Conservation Commission, had some agreements with some entities that could do that, and you could also, and there's certain qualifications for that, but there are entities that do this work. They would also come with a price, and then knowing the price of that, that would become the endowment that would have to be approved, along with whatever the cost of the conservation restriction. But you could just you get all of that up front is the idea. You'd figure all that out up front. So my thought is about the upfrontness, so that these things don't fall apart in the 11th hour. Say if someone had an application to acquire a piece of land and preserve it as open space. We supported it and would recommend funding for it. But what if the devil is in the details were not worked out? So what if the Conservation Commission balked at holding the restriction because of, say, workload?
Right.
We want to get all that cleared out at the beginning, not at the 11th hour. So, a month or 3 weeks before town meeting, we then learn the Conservation Commission doesn't feel they have the capacity to do this.
I remember when this was initially brought up, late last summer or whatever, that was
Yeah.
you know how Mark Garrett is.
Yeah, I do.
He's a very passionate person, and
Yeah.
that was exactly where it went, right off the rip.
Yeah.
I don't have the staff, the ability, the budget to be able to do,
Yeah.
do this work.
So I think the idea is, can we get all this kind of up front so that when we're making recommendations to town meeting, this piece is in place. Everybody understands what their role is, the costs are covered, and all of that kind of stuff. So my thought is, we would need in an application for a land acquisition, they would need to identify the holder, like the applicant would need to identify who's gonna hold this CR, and then have a letter of intent from that entity. So it might be, the town's gonna hold this with Buzzards Bay, jointly with Buzzards Bay. And then we'd have something from Buzzards Bay saying, and the town saying, yeah, we know this project, we can do it, and,
Has there been any feedback? Because I know this last project was kind of like the red flag from the state. Has there been any feedback from DNRT or Buzzards Bay on how
this is gonna change going forward?
No, no. Nick not seem fazed by it. So, no, no. The town warrant article, and I think this is what we learned in the historic preservation, the warrant article has to name who's gonna receive the endowment. So you can't give the endowment to the town, and then the town can decide what to do, who to give the endowment to. I think that was, we had a real conundrum several years ago around historic preservation endowment, that it had to be a separate article with the receiving entity named, so that the town knew. So when you go to town meeting's the only one who can prove the use of the CPA funds. Then the town meeting is specifically approving an endowment for a particular entity.
Honey,
Yes,
don't, I seem to remember towns do have funds, usually the bequest of some departed fine citizen to do some public
yeah,
duty. And these funds are occasionally expended at the direction of usually some town body. Is that what we're talking about?
I think they're different in the sense of those kind of private endowments, have broad, a broad scope. I mean, in those endowments, you can, you probably see like, you can use this for anything related to public school, blah, blah.
Or,
But when you go to town meeting for the use of CPA funds, my understanding is has to be town meeting, since they're the only body that makes decisions about CPA funds, they have to have has to be specific. I'm probably not explaining that very well, but with historic preservation endowments, which means just money up front, and held in escrow in case you needed to use it in the future, that's what this is.
I'm just thinking about a reserve fund for the slate roof that has 10 years to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or that will need to be replaced in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, certainly there are buildings where you'd like to have, if you're gonna own that building, you ought to have that much in the bank to replace that roof that's gonna go.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that what we're talking about?
I think it was a few years ago that we had this roundabout on the preservation endowment. So town council was very adamant that it was a separate warrant article with the named entity. I can't recall the gory details of that, but it was an unpleasant several months of back and forth, as I recall, about that. So probably we'd also want to advise people who are considering acquisitions of land and with conservation restrictions that best to submit our little eligibility consultation request thing so we can have a little conversation like we just had with the cultural council, but just make sure that everybody understands you have to inform the Conservation Commission about the project and get them on board on holding the restriction and get the information about who that is and how much it will cost if it's held jointly. There's a few things that might just, be really helpful to talk to people early on so they can kind of do their homework. And then, of course, we have to have a
much would an endowment cost?
You know, it's a great question. I don't know. When we, historic preservation ones were, I think it was like 5, 6, 7, 8, 5 to 10,000, I think it was at the time. Those are the kind of numbers that were being tossed around. So I don't know.
I just worry that if it's burdensome, if it's for a farm, that price point is gonna be put onto the farmer. So if like Buzzards Bay comes in, buys a property, puts a conservation restriction on it for agriculture, and then wants to turn around and sell it to a farmer to keep it in compliance, they're just gonna add that on to the farmer, and it's already at a level that farmers can't afford. So if it's, is there a way to offset that?
Yeah, and I don't think that will happen. I understand what you're saying. Because the CPA funds will cover that cost.
Okay,
And so what we're talking about is then we would have to pay for that endowment. So that, right, it would not be passed on to somebody else to pay for.
right. But then the burden is on us to decide whether or not that other entity can access that money?
Once, if, let's say it's Buzzards Bay and there's a warrant article that, you know, Buzzards Bay is gonna hold it jointly with the town, and Buzzards Bay will, do that for $10,000, for that, you know, for this particular property. So then I think the way it is, the town warrant would read, all right, the town approves, approves $10,000 in CPA funds, for Buzzards Bay, for, and then something of their obligations of maintaining the conservation restriction for, 555 Main Street. So very specific, like I think, so that Buzzards Bay will have this $10,000, can only use it for 555 Main Street and the obligations of conservation restriction enforcement. The money part comes in, it's not so much to go around and look at the property and stuff. That's why lots of times there isn't endowment. But that all goes south as soon as there's a violation. Because now you're buying attorneys. Now you're bringing attorneys in, and maybe you're going to court, and then, that's the real concern about these endowments to cover that.
I could be wrong, but I think most of the time, other than if there's a private property abutter or something like that, you don't see any significant violations of
Yeah.
a conservation restriction because the entities that we partner with
That's
they
their
have-
mission.
That's
Yeah.
their mission to
Yeah.
do, so.
Yeah.
And they're mostly like passive recreation, stuff like that. I'm not really familiar with like the agricultural side of it. I'm more familiar with like the passive recreation, open spaces and how those have worked in the time that I've been on the Conservation Commission, but,
I've seen infractions on the ag side. And the organization's not able to enforce.
what would be like an example, just out of curiosity?
The land has to be kept in agriculture, so if it's overgrown, if you're not haying it, if you're not, you have to make a certain value off of it.
Okay.
It's a fairly low bar usually, it's usually like $5,000 you have to gross off of that land and then keep it maintained as ag land. So if you were to, someone got sick in the family and you didn't farm for several years, and it's like 2 years in a row. So it's fairly easy for it to happen.
Okay.
So I think with this, so what could be shaping up is an application process, again, we have people, we advise people that they should always get a consultation request to us so we can talk about how all this works. A sponsor would verify with the Conservation Commission the intent to request CPA funds for open space acquisition and verify the CR endowment, if it's going to be held jointly by the town and a private entity. And then the sponsor would submit an application that includes the Conservation Commission's intent to hold the CR, either individually or jointly. The designated entity is identified, and the amount of the endowment is identified. And there's a letter from the entity, that private entity, saying, yes, I'll do this. I think if we get all of that, so that's basically checking all those boxes at the time of application, so that when we look at the project, that whole piece is taken care of. We know who's gonna hold the restriction, Conservation Commission is aware of the project, we know how much an endowment's gonna be, and we know who's gonna hold it. And it's all that, those are the elements that will make this work great, they're all in order. When we do project reviews, we can also take up the question of, is there anything about the standard CR, terms and conditions that the sponsor has any issues with, I guess. So if we get the standard stuff in about protecting agricultural land and agricultural landscape, that's standard. Then the action of the committee is whether or not to remove it for one reason or another, because it's too much of it has a detrimental impact for whatever reason. And then we go to town meeting, and we would, in most cases, have two warrant articles, one for the CR and one for the endowment. So I think it could flow that way if we had it all like up front, these things figured out, and the sponsor would take care of that by talking with the Conservation Commission before the application's filed. Some of the questions, does this apply to recreation? I did get the answer to that, yes. And so what, I was curious then on, because I think this is something in the past. I'm not sure we've always had conservation restrictions on recreation. Sometimes we've accepted the, what is it, chapter 90 or something? That's
roads.
Something that
61A?
establishes something as recreational land.
Oh, yeah,
And once established, you can't take it out,
it's
it's a
very
big,
difficult.
big deal to take it out of that. So I think most often, or I think in some of our projects, we've accepted that. I don't know if that's always gonna be the case in the future, so that's something we probably have to take a look at. And then, of course, what if the town doesn't approve the endowment? It's always an outside chance. Town meeting can be unpredictable sometimes. And so that was a question, well, maybe can we wrap both the endowment and the project into one article so we avoid that, having one
61B.
approved and the other one. What is it?
Chapter 61B.
61B, thank you. So, I'm laying all this out to you, it's still draft, it's kind of like, this is, Buddy's musings.
Do you mind if I meet with Mark and have him look over this?
No. So next steps, so just make sure Mark knows this is a super rough draft. Unverified, I still need to but I wanted to sort of just check in with you all if I'm even making any kind of sense on this. So I'm gonna do a little research into how the other towns have done this process. Then I think the step is to run this outline, tweak it, and then run it by town council and say, am I getting this right in terms of what the options are and how this would work? We'd have, confirm the whole endowment warrant article thing. Come back to you all with, another version of this that has input. And then there will be a better version, I think. You can
Yep.
show Mark where this is headed.
Yeah.
But there's a better version probably to take to Conservation Commission.
Mike Kehoe too might be a good resource
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
the endowment things
Yeah.
and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
he's a real estate attorney.
Yeah. But I think some of the key things that are helpful is, one, you can hold, I did confirm, you can hold these restrictions jointly. So I think it's probably not.
We've done that.
Not too
I
early
know,
for.
I can't cite a specific project, but I know we've done it in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So it's probably not too early for some conservation to consider, like, okay, well, could we line up a couple of people, entities that would do this? And when we had these CPA projects, we just know we would be tapping them for that. So, yeah, but just caution that
absolutely.
there will be a different version
Yep.
eventually that they're gonna see once some of this background's done. Any questions about that? I mean, in the end, I think it'll be simple, but like, get your ducks in order and apply.
I just recommend
Yeah.
reaching out to American Farmland Trust for the template on agricultural use.
Okay,
They tend to have they've worked out an ag-friendly verbiage for conservation restrictions.
okay, American
American Farmland Trust.
Farmland Trust.
I've been meeting with them recently, so I'm happy to make the introduction.
That would be great. That would be great. You have my email and stuff, so yeah, I would really appreciate that. So at a future meeting, I'll be able to report back on how some of this is coming together, some of that more research, and also what I've learned from looking at some of these other towns who are funding land trusts. So far, they seem to be open space and not specific to agriculture, and we're talking specific to agriculture. I don't think that's real different in terms of kind of procedurally or whatever. But what I can anticipate is where we will get to is wanting to have a description of what this trust is empowered to do. Right, so there'll have to be some kind of, scope of the agricultural trust that is capitalized with CPA funds. And I think these land trusts will probably give some idea about what that might look like. Cool. Any questions about any of that? All right. That leaves us with our next meeting, which is it, I think June 11th? And I was thinking probably good to just look at our web page. And so maybe DCTV can make it so that we can see the web page up on that big screen, or somehow we can figure out how to get it up on the big screen. So maybe, Michelle, if you want to look into how can we see the web page or the website up on the big screen? Because I think it might be helpful to take a look at it together as you know, how does it flow, you know, in terms of the information on it? What are the other things we'd like to see on it? That kind of stuff. So, so at this point, we should be able to have all of the applications, links to the applications for the projects that we are moving forward with. Yeah, yeah, I failed to look at it before today's meeting, but at this stage, then we've got all of those projects up there, so someone can go to our webpage and see these are the projects that have been reviewed for the upcoming town meeting. And you find the whole application, everything that we saw, you would find up there. All right, any questions? All right. Great. I think that's all we have. We're supposed to end at 8:25, so I don't know if anybody just wants to sit for 10 minutes, or we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
You can, I'll be gone. Motion to
Let's see,
adjourn.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Second.
5, 6. One of us can leave.
Any discussion? Yeah. All right, all in favor? I
Aye.
think that was unanimous. Yeah, what if we lost the quorum, huh? Yeah, the rest of us had to just sit here forever.
Yeah.